Thank you, Ed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rav Chanina ben Dosa Omer. Rav Chanina Dosa says, Kol sheyiras cheto kodemes l'chochmoso. Once fear of sin precedes his wisdom, chochmosim skayemis. His wisdom, his knowledge remains intact. Kol shechochmoso kodemes l'cheto, but one's wisdom knowledge precedes his fear of sin. Okay, let's talk. Give you an example. A person's very smart, very well educated, but he's totally caught up with his ego. And he doesn't take advice because he believes he knows better. And he was never mentored by anyone. But you realize he has a genius IQ, but you realize life is experience. And as smart as a person may believe he is, he still needs guidance, he needs mentoring. If you don't have that mentoring, and he makes an investment, although it seems to be profitable, but because since he's not willing to take advice from others or be mentored by others, the expert in the field, he's going to make mistakes, which those mistakes should not be made. Why? Because he has nothing guiding him. When he enters into that area, it's inevitable he's going to go off and he's going to do things which are going to be maybe disastrous to him, detrimental to him, or harmful to him. But he's a smart guy. But if you don't tread slowly and cautiously to see the forest from the trees, ultimately, you're going to fall on your face. Now, here we're talking about the Gemara tells us, we mentioned this before a person is conceived, there's a pronouncement on that person. Wise, foolish. Healthy, weak, infirm. Wealthy, poor. Handsome, not so handsome, or ugly. Every pronouncement of that person's life is pronounced regarding him, except one pronouncement, not Rasha or Tzaddik. Is it going to be a Rasha or Tzaddik? Which is based on his decision. Why? Because that's free choice. God gives you endowments. The question is now how you can use those endowments. Are you going to use it within the context of making a choice to be the tzaddik? And if that is the case, understanding who you are and who you're not, because you're subject, you're subordinated to Hashem, therefore automatically you have a certain humility, because you realize that you're bound to a higher power. And that's called Yiras Chet. King David says, Reishis Chok Miras Hashem. What's the prerequisite to wisdom? Fear of God. If you realize there's accountability, and you realize there's certain things, although you believe, you have certain liberties in that area, but because you fear God, it puts things in perspective. And it has to conform to God's formula in many areas. And there's a lot of not good advice, it's integral advice. It gives you the roadmap to succeed in life. And even when you have a setback, many times the setback is only a distraction. Yeah, sometimes you have to pick yourself up and keep going. Or sometimes you have a setback, it's an indication you have to walk away. So even though a person may have an endowment of wealth, but what happens if a person makes too many wrong choices? The father gives a son a monthly availability of cash, line of credit, and the father sees the son literally just burning good money after bad money. What's the father going to do? And as much as the son should understand, he still doesn't understand. You know what the father does? He cuts off the line of credit. Doesn't make any sense. So although you're endowed and you have privileges because of who your father is, but if you're going to utilize that money irresponsibly or destructively, if the father really is concerned for the child, he's going to cut him off. Now maybe the child will come back to the father and ask him, Father, why'd you cut me off? And the father will explain to him. Because the way you're dealing and behaving, everything else, it's not acceptable. And I'm just not going to give you privileges where the privilege is being wasted and being abused and being destroyed. I'm not going to give it to you. So a person may start off in the good column, in the black column. But if that black column turns red because he's not acting responsibly, God may just shut him down. The wisdom we're speaking about here particularly is the wisdom of Torah. How you have to live as a Jew. And even with your secular knowledge. How that secular has to conform with how you have to be a Jew. So if the fear of sin precedes your wisdom, your education, your Torah studies, your wisdom will remain intact, meaning you'll be able to maximize on your knowledge. You retain it and maximize it, and you're not going to miss a beat, not a beat whatsoever. But otherwise, your wisdom will not, meaning your Torah wisdom for sure will not. Even your secular education, you may retain it, and you may succeed financially. But the component which gives it value, it's not going to be there. You're not going to build your spiritual capital. There's not going to be spiritual capital as a result of this. So chachmos ein kayemis. You're going to be too busy for God. Sometimes a person becomes so busy, he has no time for God in his life. Could you imagine? And the person says, of course, God gave me this gift. I'm in, the Forbes 500, number 16, only because God put me there. And how much of your life occupies God? Well, every morning I say Modani because my grandmother taught me that. That's about all that's left. And I eat Mrs. Adler's gefilte fish when it comes Passover. And I drink Manischewitz, wine in that square bottle, because that's what they used to sell in 1936. And my grandfather left me a few empty bottles. Okay, so I know what to buy. Yeah, so that's about what the Judaism ends up. Man has no fear of sin, has no fear of God. He believes he's the closest thing to God. But in God we trust, and God we believe. But belief and trust is not a figment of one's imagination. It's a reality in one's life. It's a story about the Chofetz Chaim. He had a very close student, very exceptional student. And he was engaged to get married, and his future father was a very wealthy man. His father gave him a tremendous amount of money to invest when he got married, to go into business. And a year later, somehow he lost it, although it was a tremendous amount of money. And after he lost it all, in less than a year, he comes to Chofetz Chaim and he's hurting. His father was not giving him any more money. There was a certain amount. Once he gave it, it's gone. That's it. Now he's on his own. So he comes to the Chofetz Chaim and he tells him the story. So he sees the Chofetz Chaim smiling. So he asked his Rebbe, the Chofetz Chaim is a holy man. He says, Rebbe, here I'm hurting. I'm in the doldrums. I can't put food on the table. Why is the Rebbe smiling? He says, you don't understand. God was good to you. Why was God good to you? Because ultimately, I saw when you got that money, immediately you compromised your Judaism. You didn't study as you studied before. So you're out of studies for 6 months, 9 months, and then you lose it all. You can still come back. What about if you lose it after 20 years and you're out of it? What you were good at 20 years ago, if you haven't been involved for 20 years and now you lose it all, you want to come back, you're not coming back any longer. You'll have faint recollections of that knowledge. You're no longer going to be a Talmud Chacham. You're not going to be a person who functions within that realm of person, within that classification. Therefore, you should know, I'm smart because God was good to you. Thank God you lost it now, you're going to lose it in 20 years from now. If, in fact, you would have been fully committed despite the wealth, and you would have been responsible and have times to study Torah is one thing. But I saw you didn't. And sometimes you can't tell the person. If he doesn't want to listen, you can't tell him. He has to learn the hard way. So now you have no choice. You lost it all, so you're coming back. But God did you a favor. Because if you would have been out of it for 20 years, you would have never come back. Even if you want to come back, what would you be? You'd be an ordinary person. But if the person would have had Yirischeto, Kodem, if his knowledge would have been predicated, it's not I enjoy learning. I'm the smartest guy in my group, in my peer group. That's not what's driving me. Because I'm getting the attention, the acknowledgement. That's not who I am. I'm here because that's what God wants me to be. And I'm studying because God wants. Do I enjoy it? I enjoy it. One thing has nothing to do with another. You know, when you eat the matzah at the Seder, you may enjoy that shmor matzah, even if Chabad gives it to you. You enjoy it. But is that the mitzvah to enjoy it? Or the mitzvah is to eat matzah at the Seder? Happens to be you enjoy it, it's great. You enjoy study, you enjoy the intellectualism of Torah. But that's not what it's all about. It's all the level of commitment to God, how to live as an appropriate Jew. But if the studies don't manifest themselves as that, so when does it manifest itself as that? If it's predicated on your fear of heaven, then the studies, now you know how to navigate your life. What yes, what not. And there's certain sensitivities which the average person doesn't have, you should have. But you only have those sensitivities if it's predicated on your fear of heaven. Then you have those sensitivities. Now, sometimes we have the Torah is divided to different parts. I'm not only speaking negative and positive commandments. You have certain laws which are rational laws, and you have certain laws which are statutes, which there's no rational meaning. That we understand why a person shouldn't steal and why the property rights. Because if you want to live in a society, you have to have ownership rights, and a person has certain rights, and you have no right to cross certain lines. That's rational law. But then you have laws which are statutes. The laws of dietary statutes. Torah says this you can, this is considered kosher, that's not considered kosher. Why? Because God said so. That's a chok. Now, Warren Buffett, lahavdil, elef avdolos, he advised you to buy certain stock. And it was a penny stock. And the penny stock turned out to be worth, you put in $100, $100 worth of pennies. That each share was a penny. And now each share went up $100. That's significant profit. And he advised you over the years. He made tremendous money with it. And you began understanding what to choose, what not to choose. Also now he tells you, you buy this stock, which he says this is going to be the mega of the generation. You don't understand why. But if Warren Buffett tells you to do it, especially based on the advice he's giving till now, you do it. Do you understand why? You don't have no understanding. But because since you already have a sense of Warren Buffett is, based on your track record with him, although you understand nothing, you're going to buy it. Somebody says, how can you be so foolish? Put that kind of money into that? The answer is, you know who Warren Buffett is? This guy's the expert. This guy has the Midas touch. Whatever he touches is beyond success. Lahavdil elef havdolos, to differentiate between what's holy and what's not holy. If you study and you have a sense of God due to your study, and it's coupled with fear of heaven, you become spiritualized. You have a sense. Once you have a sense, although you don't understand many things, doesn't make a difference. But you know the one you want to be associated with God. And if God says this is the way you do it, that's the way you do it. But could you explain why? No, I don't have to explain why. Because God has credibility with me, because due to my experience and my exposure, my involvement in the studies, which I do understand, and I've been touched. Once you're touched, even if you don't understand something, you embrace it. Because God has the credibility. That's what it's all about. But if you don't have yiras chet, if you don't have fear of God, of heaven, it's unrelated to heaven. It's what I enjoy. What I enjoy, what I understand is great. What I don't understand, something. But if it's not based on what you understand, it's based on who you fear, who you revere, then it's a whole different approach to what we're talking about. So therefore, it's chachmos miskayemis. Whether you understand, you don't understand, it doesn't make a difference. It depends what it's predicated on. Why did you go in? What are you doing here? You acknowledge the master, and you understand who he is and what he is, and what he offers. You grab it, if you're smart. I always say, a person has a father, he's been in business for 50 years, 60 years, well-weathered businessman. And his son comes into the business, graduates Harvard, wherever it is, graduate degree in finance. And his father says to him, you see this man? I've been doing business with him for 60 years. You could trust him with your life. Anything he tells you to do, accept his advice. And he trusts his father. His father's credible. And he knows his father wouldn't advise him where he'll be a victim of this person. But you realize, until you have firsthand experience with this person, the sense of trust the son has is not at the level of the father. Because the father's been through thick and thin with that person. Being through thick and thin, and you come out on the top together with him, he's the man. You can explain it to your son. But your son has to be able to experience it personally to see that he is that person. It may take a few years before he has enough of a sense of what that person is. But initially, he's gonna tread very slowly. He's gonna take baby steps. He's not going too deep with this guy. Unless he's pushed into it. He's not doing it. Lahavdil, with God, it's the same thing. Once you're in it and you've experienced it and you live it and breathe it, then everything you have leaves an indelible impression on you. But that's only if it's predicated on God. If you have no fear of sin, no fear of heaven, it's not predicated on God. It's predicated on who am I? It's all pleasure-driven, ego-driven, intellectual-driven. Because just as a person is finite, his knowledge is finite. And as a result of that, within finite, things begin fading. You don't grasp it, you don't understand it fully. If you're human, you make mistakes. If you have divine assistance, the divine assistance protects you to those hidden corners or whatever it is. God, make sure you don't get tripped up on it. That's what Chanina Mendoza is saying. Koshe yiras cheto chachmos kodem liyiras cheto. If the chachma precedes your fear of sin, ein chachmos miskayemis. But if your chachma is predicated on fear of heaven, fear of sin, then it's chachmos miskayemis. But let's understand what is fear of sin. It doesn't say fear of heaven. Yiras cheto. Rabbi Lutzato and Mesilas Yesharim writes, yiras chet is you fear sin, not you fear heaven. Give you an example. Years ago, my mother-in-law, Shalom, when you eat broccoli, you buy it in an ordinary supermarket. Broccoli is infested since they banned DDT. When they had DDT, there were no insects in vegetables, but because of the DDT, they banned it because of health reasons. Today, if you know how to check broccoli, the florets in broccoli, they're so embedded with tiny, tiny insects, you don't even realize they're there. There's a certain process how to clean it, And when you clean it, all of a sudden you see on a white cloth, you see endless little specks. Those specks are tiny insects. There's a Torah violation. You're not permitted to eat insects. For every insect you eat, sometimes you're in violation of 5 or 6 negative commandments. That's how serious ingesting insects is, to that degree. So I remember my mother, those days you didn't have broccoli that actually you could buy checked. Today it's triple washed with a certification. Today there's nothing you can't buy that's 100% kosher. You pay a premium, but you could buy it. In those days you had to check it yourself. So people didn't know how to check it. They just didn't eat that kind of vegetable. So my mother says, what are you talking about? I rinsed it, I washed it, I this, that. I said, Ma, there's a certain processing. Either you know how to do it or you don't know how to do it. She says, what are you talking about? I don't see any insects. I don't see any bugs. I said, Ma, let me ask you a question. If a light bulb would break and there may be slivers of glass in that broccoli, the raw broccoli, I don't care how many times you're going to wash it. There's no way you're going to serve it. Because you never know. There may be a sliver of the... Do you see it? I rinsed it 65 times. You're not going to take a chance. Why? You never know. God forbid. There could be a sliver of glass in there and you can ingest it. It could be, God forbid, detrimental to your health. You'll throw it out. Regarding one's spiritual state, ingesting insects, each one's 6 negative commandments. It's disastrous to your spiritual standing. It'll compromise you spiritually. Unless you know exactly how to extract those insects from that vegetable, you don't eat the vegetable. But what are we talking about? That's yiras chet. Very often we say, it probably is okay. But if you fear sin, that you may be violating it, not you fear God, you fear sin, it's the equivalent that may be detrimental to me. Because God said it's detrimental. A person's a diabetic. Right away, he counts his carbohydrates. Another person, somebody hosts him. What are you talking about? It's healthy. It's pure. It's this. That person doesn't know what it means to be a diabetic. He's already gone into diabetic shock a number of times and nearly didn't come back. So this man doesn't play around with his health. I've already counted and maximized on my carbohydrates, no more. Because I want to continue living. The other person who doesn't, because he's tasted, he was the door of death. I don't move as much as Naomi. Understanding the consequences and the liability of that. The other person doesn't relate to it because he's healthy. Says, what are you talking about? It's not that terrible. You've denied yourself long enough. You're at my house. You can eat like you used to eat when we were young kids together. Yeah, I'm no longer a young kid. I have certain vulnerabilities. I'm in a different place in life today. That's yiras chet. Yiras chet, if your fear of sin precedes your knowledge, that knowledge is going to remain intact. Because you're going to watch over it like a hawk. Not to be compromised. Because the whole value of studying is to know how to behave and how to live as a Jew. But if it has nothing to do with living as a Jew, and therefore you compromise it, then you don't retain it. Because it's not something which has relevance to every moment of your existence.